Hello, and welcome to the Woes of a High School Slacker podcast. My name is Graydon. I, like everybody, am many things. Funny, intelligent, good-looking, exceedingly humble. But we all have our kryptonite. And I am also a slacker. In high school, being a smart slacker is the absolute dream. Go to class, don't take notes, never study, only do homework the night before it's due, preferably at school the same day, and still pass every class with flying colors. But in my first year at Ohio State, I came to a horrifying realization. In college, you actually need to work hard. My infallible system of doing absolutely jack shit and expecting the best had met its match. And after my first semester, my grades were absolute shite. Now, I had gotten bad grades before, but I'd never finished a class with anything less than a B. So looking at a report card littered with C's and D's affected me far more than I ever thought that it could. I had based a lot of my identity on being a smart guy. But what I had come to view as the measure of my intelligence would suggest that I was nothing more than the bottom rung of the academic ladder. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had lost my sense of self. To be honest, I was pretty depressed. And this depression continued through the first several weeks of my second semester, and I'll let you in on a little secret. Depression doesn't help your grades go up. I knew I needed something to change, because if I let my situation erode my ego any longer, by the end of the year, I would have nothing left. However, those embarrassing grades ended up coming in handy. I had planned on taking Calculus 2 during the spring semester, but my grade in Calculus 1 was not satisfactory enough to continue the class path. By the time I had received my Calc 1 grade, I had already finished scheduling my classes for the next term, Calc 2 included. So, at the end of winter break, I needed to find a class that was at least 3 credit hours, had no prerequisites, and still had spots open. Or else, I wouldn't qualify as a full-time student and I would be kicked out of my dorm. Luckily, the perfect class for me and my situation appeared. ESEPSY 1259, Strategies for Learning and Motivation. For this class, I needed to set a goal for myself. And I landed on earning a GPA of 3.25 in the spring semester. Not to raise my cumulative GPA to 3.25, just to earn 3.25 this semester. Now, in my mind, 3.25 sounds unimpressive. 3.25 is B's. 3.25 is for chumps. Anything below a 3.5 is someone who just can't excel. But it was high expectations that dug me this hole, so I decided to be realistic with what I could accomplish given my schedule and mental stability. Part of me wanted to shoot for 3.5, and part of me wanted the easy target of a 3.0. So, I settled at 3.25 for the happy medium. In order to help us reach our goals, we were tasked with selecting and reading a book that would give us some advice on how we could accomplish what we had set out to do. The book I chose was Hack Your Habits by Joanna Jast, and I thought this would be a good pick for me because I am one you could certainly describe as a creature of habit. I knew that what I was doing was just as important as what I wasn't. So I figured I could kill 2 birds with one book that dealt both with breaking old habits as well as forming new ones. After actually reading the book, I found that there wasn't nearly as much material discussing breaking habits as there was for building new habits. But that's besides the point, since there were still some great strategies for me to try out. One of the strategies from the book I wanted to try was using a checklist to organize everything I needed to get done each day. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to most things. Keyword being, most. I could tell you exactly how hot it was on the 4th of July 2022 in Sunbury, Ohio. 101 degrees, by the way. Or the names of every background character in the Star Wars movies. But some days, I'll even forget to eat or brush my teeth, so forget remembering that I have 3 pages of homework and a rough draft of an essay due tomorrow. I always think that I can keep everything straight in my head, but that is me totally lying to myself. So I figured that having a reminder in a physical space would make sure that I don't disregard all my responsibilities. So I wanted to write out all the assignments I had due, classes and other obligations, as well as basic tasks like getting ready in the morning. as soon as I woke up every day. To track this, I would take a picture of myself with my dated checklist and a digital clock I keep on my desk. I was hoping that this would keep me accountable. Another strategy I wanted to try was using a preceding activity cue to develop habits. I wanted to use this to help me establish a routine for doing my assignments every day. So I decided that my preceding activity would be whatever class I had to attend that day, and the habit was to complete the assignments due for the next period as soon as possible after class. To track this, I used a stopwatch to measure the time between the end of class and when I sat down to start working, and took a screenshot. The last strategy I decided to try from Hack Your Habits was to utilize environment to develop habits. I usually work at my desk in my dorm with my phone and guitars within arm's reach. And let me tell you, I like my phone and guitars much more than homework, so I usually end up wasting my time with one of those instead. So I decided to keep my guitars out of my study space and keep my phone in my bag while I study. I also wanted to try studying at the library or other locations other than my dorm. To track this, I took a picture of my study environment every time I sat down to work. But, as I'm sure we all know, saying that you're going to do something is much, much easier than actually doing it. And this is something that hit me hard. My most successful strategy was the checklist. Since I always made sure it was the first thing I did every morning, I only forgot to make it a day or two early on. I taped it right onto my wall, so if I was ever slacking off while at my desk, I would notice it in the corner and think, wow, that sure would look nice with everything crossed off of it, huh? And that would motivate me to finish my classwork. It was also helpful outside of my goal, since the first thing I did every morning was write down the words, brush hair, brush teeth, put on deodorant. Not once did I forget to do so, which is a big bonus. I also liked it because I often feel like every day blends together in my mind, because usually my life is so unstructured and formless that there's nothing identifiable that happens in a day that I can anchor my reference of time to. And the checklist provided some structure and routine for my days, which has had some minor yet noticeable psychological benefits. However, my other strategies did not go so well, especially using preceding activity cues. My plan was to establish a routine for doing all my homework right after class every day, but this did not take into account one key flaw. I really don't like doing that. After class, I'm always hungry or just plain tired, and I feel like I need a break. Furthermore, it's really hard to remember to set a stopwatch after class every day, and harder still to press stop and take a screenshot when I get where I'm going. As a result, I only tracked this strategy a couple times, which I find a touch embarrassing, but such is life. Not quite as successful as my checklists, but definitely more so than the stopwatch, was using my environment to my advantage. When I put my guitars in the other room or studied at the library, I always felt much more concentrated and focused on whatever I was doing. I would work longer than I did with my distractions present, including the time I would waste with them. And I did far more work, and it felt like it was of a superior quality. I felt less like I was punishing myself so I could reward myself later with things I liked doing, and more like I was exercising my brain. Since playing my guitar or scrolling on my phone never even crossed my mind, because I couldn't even see them. The kryptonite of the strategy, sadly, was the tracking. Similarly to remembering to set a stopwatch, it is also really hard to remember to take a picture of your study area every time you go to sit down. So, I only tracked this strategy a handful of times. The strategies I used this semester certainly helped me come closer to achieving my goal of a 3.25 GPA. I got more work done on time, which means fewer late or missing assignments, which resulted in higher grades. I can't say for sure if I achieved it until after exams, but as of right now, I have a couple B's and an A. So, as long as I'm able to concentrate and continue using these strategies to help me study for finals, it should be mission accomplished. Overall, the biggest takeaway I had was that the most important thing when achieving your goals is yourself. The book I read gave me a lot of advice on things I could do to help myself out and build habits, but a book can lead a man to water, not make him drink. I actually put a certain amount of effort into writing my checklists, Even if I wanted to sleep more or just scroll on my phone in bed in the morning, I thought to myself, you said you would do this. And so, I resolved myself to do what I set out to do. My other strategies didn't pan out quite as well because I just didn't put the same amount of effort into it. It was hard to do work after class, and so sometimes I decided not to. It was hard to remember to take pictures of things. So, I didn't. But there are things that I could have done to help me do better at using and tracking those strategies, and it's up to me and myself alone to hold myself accountable for doing those. Another takeaway I had from Hack Your Habits was the true power habit holds over us. For many of us, myself especially, habit is what dictates almost every aspect of my life. I go to Scott to eat every day after class. Why? Out of habit. I tend to complete my assignments after the sun goes down. Why? Habit. Habit may have power over our actions, but we have power over our habits. And through great effort, we can mold our habits into something that improves our lives, rather than shackle us to a vicious cycle of unhappiness. This has been the Woes of a High School Slacker podcast with Graydon Hall. Catch you on the flip side. Ooh.